A hot and sunny morning at Brands Hatch. Welcome along, everybody, to the warm-up session for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. We're on the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch. And when we say warm-up, we're pretty warm already. It's just nudged past, or approaching 10 o'clock, and already people are sweltering in the heat. It's going to get hotter and hotter. A 2-hour race is going to be quite grueling for everybody in overalls, especially those drivers that will be the start driver strapped into the car early. Temperatures going up, track temperature already 28.6 degrees. And this session, of course, won't affect the grid. What it will do is give the teams a chance to do what they want, practice pit stops, make sure that everything is right going into the race, address any issues perhaps that were found yesterday. The Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch is always a great challenge. It always delivers great action, and we're looking forward hugely to this penultimate round of the championship. David Addison and Joe Osborne trackside. Joe, this is a proper old school lap, isn't it?
It really is. You can see where the circuit map's drawing at the moment, out the back in the trees, very tight, very narrow, but also the track's always going up and down. So that's why you go up and down this pit lane and ask any of the drivers, do they like the circuit? And all of them will just give you a simple yes. It's probably the best in the UK to drive over a single lap, but when you're in the pack of cars, it's one of the hardest to do a clean overtake. So it's going to be really interesting when we get into the depth of that 2-hour race, how desperate people are to make moves on each other.
Just looking ahead, we've got drivers obviously in the cars now for what's going to be a short session, but if you're the start driver, you are strapped in, you head round to the grid, you get a bit of heat soak. The AMs in most cases, the slower driver, the lower graded driver will go first. And okay, you wouldn't expect them to do quite as much necessarily as the pro, but even so, it's going to be hard work in these cars. The temperatures within the cockpit are going to be high come the race.
Yeah, there's a big variance on cockpit temperatures depending on how the manufacturer does it. I know the GT3 Aston is probably the best, the aircon system in that car, the drivers say they actually can't run it on maximum because it's too cold. So yes, the temperature's all right, but I know other cars don't have that benefit. But the AMs are still doing an hour of driving. So, oh, well done, you're sat down doing some driving for an hour. It's not that simple. It's more like jogging. So you go, oh, that's easy. Well, can you jog for an hour in 35-degree heat? That's the question you should be asking yourself.
Now, somebody who is looking forward to the Grand Prix circuit, Jules Gounon, he's in the pit lane with Bryn Lucas.
Well, Jules, you can't win the championship this year because you missed a round, but Ian's still going for it, the reigning champion in GT3. The pressure's really on, though, isn't it? Because you need to essentially win here at Brands Hatch for that dream to stay alive.
Well, I don't think the pressure is on us. The pressure is on the people that are in front of us, maybe. But for us, we're only going to try to have a good result. Quali didn't win really like we wanted yesterday. As you said, we wanted to be in the front to try to win this race and get big points before Donington. But if we can stay in the match before Donington, I think in Donington, as you have seen last year, everything can happen, and we never know what can happen. So hopefully we can be the third guy going into Donington, and maybe Darren and James get a bit excited, and then we can take something out of it. But again, I'm here to try to help Ian. Yesterday, tried my best, but we will try today to get a good result under the belt and to be able to fight on the last round.
It's an iconic place, Brands Hatch. It's a roller coaster of a circuit, isn't it? What's it like to perform out there, particularly in temperatures that we're seeing this weekend?
Yeah, it's an amazing track. Coming into here, I have always a great relationship with Lelo, and we have a good rivalry when we always want to try to beat each other. And when I arrived here, I was like, Lelo in Brands Hatch normally is quite difficult to beat. So yesterday after quali, I was like, where's Lelo? And we have always this kind of stuff. So when you fight against top drivers and on such an amazing track with an amazing car, it's really cool. And I think that's why I always want to come in British GT, because the tracks are amazing. There's not so many issues with track limits, and in the middle of the track you need a big pair of a big heart, let's say. It's more polite. So it's really cool.
Nicely put. Look, good luck at that. Try and stay cool. Cheers, Jules.
Thank you.
Well self-censored, Jules. Right, there's his car. Ian Logie at the wheel of it, blasts out of the pit lane, and out he goes. Bang on the green flag. Jules Gounon ending his sentence to perfection. So we're in business then for this 15-minute warm-up session. The James Cottingham Championship leading, Mercedes venturing out behind. The 2Cs Mercedes, curious, isn't it, in a sense, Joe, that with all due respect, the Cottingham Adam car has just generally felt the quicker of the two, certainly in the most recent races.
Yeah, I think in the second half of the year they've really come alive.
Yeah.
without knowing the ins and outs, and I speak to the team quite a lot, but they're not going to give me the information, obviously, I think it's just a big strength of Johnny Adam. I think the co-driver, the pro, it's up to him to get the car in the window for the AM to be fast, and I think that's what he's done, and that's why he's a clinical winner, and he's done it. And when we go on board with Cottingham here, we saw it in qualifying yesterday, Cottingham was relaxed, but the car looks easy to drive. He had a little spin, but he didn't seem fazed by it because he was just over-driving it into Hawthorns on the outlet, probably just getting your eye in, so he's on the brakes a little bit long, but still fourth gear into Westfield. It's a really short break, down to third, in all over the curb. Those bollards will be gone after a few laps, I'm sure. Down into Dingledale, rising all the way, hit your braking point, in over the curb. You can see it on the right there. Normally on the outlap, the tyre pressures are a little bit low, so the engineer will ask the driver to stay off the curbs. If you use the curb while the pressure's still low, you can damage the tyre wall and you get a failure later on in its life. Into the last corner, hard on the brakes, chuck it in over the blind place, all the way up to the gravel trap and wind it out. And now it's a relatively long straight, but the only thing you're not doing is turning straight on this bit. It's all the way into paddock. Big rise is he going to go. If you're confident you're going to leave it in fourth, he goes down to third, I think there, just to get the front end in and let it out wide. Big stop here into Durance. Is he going to veer off, or is he going to do a more traditional U shape? So he's let it run wide, he's coming back for a second, so that's kind of that V shape, which I think the Mercedes loves and gives it good traction. Into Graham Hill, open it up, you can use a lot of curb on the inside, they've reprofiled it this year. Down again, another not straight, down the Cooper straight, hard on the brake and Surtees, open the corner up. This is where he spun yesterday. Is he confident with it? Gets it in nice, release the lock. You can actually get a lot of traction on the grass on the exit there, as we see the first of our driver change practice. Sandy Mitchell on the left there, Sean Balfe closing the door. They have to get back across that big white line, then the team can start refueling, then do the tyres and then do the driver change. The Barwell guys are so well rehearsed, but this being the first race after the summer break, the teams will probably just want to go through the motions and make sure they don't pick up any penalties in the race for their pit stops.
It's always interesting, isn't it, to see what teams do in the course of the session, whether it is to do these practice pit stops, whether it is to go for a time, scrub in tyres. Every team will have a sort of job sheet that they work their way through. And Sandy Mitchell, Nottingham-based Scottish driver, stands by the car. As 97, this is the car that Ross Gunn, which was the quickest of the pro drivers yesterday in the Beach Team Aston. Driver returning, he missed Portimao. We had Nicky Tim in the car, but Ross Gunn reminding people how good he is. He still flies under the radar a bit, Ross Gunn, doesn't he? But Andrew Howard at the wheel of the car, and Andrew is no slouch as an AM either, if AM is not doing him a disservice.
Yeah, I think Andrew's actually upped his game again this year. We've known him in British GT for well over a decade. He's won the championship. Just felt like he had a bit of a lull maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the same time as this new Vantage was introduced. So maybe he was really at home in the old V12 Vantage, and when ProDrive went to this turbo V8, maybe he's just getting his eye back in. But I've been really impressed with him this year. He's had some mega overtakes as well, so it'd be interesting to see where he can end up at the end of the race today.
We did see as well him have a go in a McLaren and a Mercedes, didn't we, last year, just to sort of have a little hunt around and see which he thought was the best package for him. Across the timing line goes 97 then. That is Andrew Howe. The best time thus far, should it matter, is James Cottingham, who's done a 1:26.829. The grid, of course, is based on the aggregated time of the Pro and the AM. Second fastest, Kevin Say in the Sky Tempesta McLaren, the Macanese driver, and then you've got Simon Orange going third fastest. Right, so this down the hill is Andrew Howard, blasting his way through some of the GT4 traffic, ducks up the inside there of 17, and having put himself up ahead of the Enduro Motorsport Mercedes, he's then got another one to sort out. Right, so James Cottingham, 1:26.829, remaining the fastest. We've had about a third of this session done, 5 minutes gone. The track limit warnings are starting to come, perhaps not surprisingly, because we always get some around the Grand Prix circuit. It's the R Racing number 23 GT4 Aston Josh Miller Seb Hopkins car that is the first recipient, and it is Seb Hopkins at the wheel. Back on board with Andrew Howard then as he hustles his way around the Grand Prix section of the circuit through Dingledale and then down towards that slightly banked left-hander of Sterling's here. The car just tilts ever so slightly into the corner. Yeah, it's beautiful, isn't it? You really get such a positive camber there. You obviously see how in NASCAR why they bank their tracks go fast, but you really feel it in the car as a driver, hunkers you in. Probably generally lets you feel like you carry 10, 15 kilometres an hour more than if it was just a flat bit of road, so you can really barrel a lot of speed in there. But it does then give you a sort of false sense of security, because as you exit, you lose the camber, and the barrier is actually really close on the exit on the left-hand side. You see a lot of cars
going there as we see the DTO GT4 Altura pole position for the race later. Aston Miller doing a mega job in Q1, really gave that car a really strong chance, and Josh Rowledge just got it over the line, 900ths quicker than the Academy Mustang in second, so it's good performance by them. It's so interesting to watch the GT4s under braking. The GT3s look so planted, don't they? And we know they're faster, but the GT4s have just got that little bit softer suspension, and they're just that much higher. The minimum ride height's higher, so you can really see them pitch and roll, and it's quite an interesting dynamic.
Just looking at the road there, coming out of Surtees onto the Grand Prix, it looks very dirty, as though somebody's been off and dragged a load of rubbish onto the circuit. And if they do that over the course of a 2-hour race, then offline, it's going to just catch you out, maybe. Yeah,
definitely. Like I said on the onboard costume, there's a lot of grip on the grass on the exit, so people will naturally use it. But we're seeing even in qualifying, in the sort of 24 minutes the cars were running in that, the grills were full of grass, and a lot of cars are already on the upper limit of their threshold for cooling with it being so warm. If you even lose 5% with blocked grass, then cars are going to struggle there as well. And even I know from my limited knowledge that dry grass and heat sometimes can make quite a nice fire as well. So there's a lot of things for drivers to keep an eye out. If you can avoid it, mega. But it's normally just getting thrown up by a GT3 car into your grill as we go. Looking at the Academy Mustang, really saw a good day for them yesterday, second, third overall in qualifying. So I think one of them is going to win the race today. Why? I think the car's fast, which obviously helps, but they've not really got a championship to worry about, whereas the McLarens around them do. So Matt Nicol-Jones and Will Moore in this car are super aggressive, and I think that's going to really play to their strengths, and I think the McLarens are going to be wary of them.
The only downside, of course, is that they're a silver, so they do cop the extra time in the pits, that silver success penalty. So again, with it being a long race, kind of the Pro-Am GT4 cars, you might argue, have an advantage, but a safety car can change all of that, can't it, in either stint. Into the pit lane comes Chris Hart in the drive tack. Mercedes also in his Ian Loggy. James Cottingham is in as well in the very distinctive bright yellow Mercedes. Sam Neary, by the way, has gone quickest. Mercedes again, but the ABBA racing car. Sean Balfe has taken over the Barwell Lamborghini as we've got to about the halfway point of the session. And the best lap time now, 1:26.906. Not everybody has ventured out either. We've had one or two that have done a sort of installation lap, you might say, but not done a proper lap time.
Yeah, just going back to the 2Cs cars boxing, it's a very tight pit lane. Yeah. It's actually what limits the amount of cars we can have here at Brands Hatch, not the length of the circuit. And I just thought the 2Cs car, Loggy came in first and went for the nearest box, which made Cottingham have to go long. But then Loggy would be ready to leave earlier, would then be boxed in by his own teammate. A lot of teams, multiple car teams, will tell you which box to go to. So if you're the first car, you go long, and then the next car filters in behind. But it looks like they've got their designated boxes. They put their beach towels out, and that's where they're staying for the day. So if we were to get a safety car in the pit stop window, that's going to get spicy into team there in their pit lane.
But is it as easy as doing that, or because you've got designated mechanics, you've got a designated fuel rig, you've got the designated tyres, it's harder to move everything quickly, isn't it? You kind of have to go with what you've chosen. It might be better to bring them in a lap apart rather than try and shift everything up and down, even if it's only two garages.
You try and tell an AM to come in a lap early to hand over to their pro and potentially lose 2 seconds. You are right, the fuel rig should be exactly the same. The mechanics can move quite quickly with the tyres for that car. So again, a good, cool engineer can orchestrate it. As soon as a bit of panic sets in over that radio and you see the mechanics start flapping, you don't know if you're going to get a set of wets or a set of get me home tyres on it. As we see Frog at box now, they're quite early in the pit lane. Yeah. See the Optimum McLaren, he's got a slot in between that. That's his pit board. You see him swing around. It's painfully slow.
What's better, to be at pit in or to be at pit out?
Depends where you get blocked in and then you change your mind. But I've always preferred pit in, easier for the AM to spot because it's early, they're ready for it. And also, once you get out into the fast lane, you're safe and you can make up or lose a bit of time if needed. If you're at pit exit, once you've left, you've already fired your shot, you're done. Yeah. You can't affect that time. So you can see an outboard shot coming into Sterling. Like I was saying, super banked here, slow-mo. Look at that front right tyre, really under load car, just starting to get a wobble on. It's going to run wide by the looks of it. He's already on a pretty wide trajectory. You've got the curb, the green bit, and then the dirt. And he's using a fair amount of that dirt, but he's got the steering wheel straight. So you can see the car didn't really rotate. It wasn't upset by that dirt.
And you saw the left-hand wheels still on the racetrack, so that was fine for track limits. Even though he was in the gravel, it was okay as far as track limit offences were concerned. We're into the last 5 minutes of this warm-up session now, which find wood to touch. We've got through with pretty limited drama. Number 80, Ian Duggan and Joe Wheeler's Ginetta, the left-hand drive Toro Verde GT car. Jules Westwood overseeing the team. David Fairbrother squad that we see also in Carrera Cup and Cayman Sprint Challenge. Downhill it comes.
I don't think we have any right-hand drive cars anymore, do we? With the Bentley GT3 going and now Ginetta adopting the left-hand drive approach.
I had a feeling we still had a right-hand drive Ginetta as well as a left, but
Okay.
over 2 hours we'll double check. But you're right, even the Aston has gone left-hand drive.
There was always a logic I was told by engineers that there's more right-handers who'd rather be on the left and
Yes,
have a better look
around the
through
corner. Yeah.
So that's what the Bentley drivers always used to complain about when they were off the pace, is they can't see the corner.
I remember asking a certain touring car racer why, when he drove an MG, which was a very British brand, did he sit on the left? And that was exactly the answer, that when they designed the car, it was because you had a better perspective around the, on a clockwise circuit. There's another left hooker, Ginetta, and 72 Lamborghini of Will Tregurtha, now up to the top of the times.
Sorry, a fast time as well. That it's Will Tregurtha, who is a pro, but that would have been quick enough for pole in the AM session. So I'm surprised they're as fast as they are in terms of they've obviously saved some quite fresh tyres for warm-up. So they must have an abundance of tyres for the 2-hour race later. I assume they've probably got a new set left for that then.
A very handy esports racer as well, Will Tregurtha, the Simply Race back driver, but he doesn't get the recognition he deserves for some reason. He was demon quick, 4 or 5 seasons ago in the GT4 European Series. Put him into anything and Will Tregurtha delivers. And yet people don't talk about him in the same way that they talk about other GT3 quick Brits. He gets on with life and he does the talking on the track, to use the old cliche, but I think Will Tregurtha is perhaps better than people give him credit for being.
Yeah, definitely. I spoke to Will probably 7 or 8 years ago. He was obviously really struggling because he rang me for some advice, just done a purple Sector 2, and we met up for a coffee.
He was asking for somebody's number, was he?
Yeah, exactly. We met up for a coffee, lovely lad, and he was just so quiet and unassuming, and I said, I'm not the biggest one with an ego, I like to think, but I was like, mate, you need to just pick yourself up more. You're so good, and every time you get in anything, you're a hustler, and that's what I like about young drivers that can drive anything. Like you said, some drivers become so fast in a particular car, and once you move them, you show their weakness, their Achilles heel. But Will hasn't got that, and I just hope another couple of years of strong pace, steady results are going to show the world that he's not just another British young fast GT driver.
Well, right now he's half a second quicker and a bit than Jules Gounon, who's up to second. Sam Neary third. Charles Clark venturing out on track. Now this is the car that could sew up GT4 in the course of the championship, and there is the McLaren heading down the hill. Ross Garner's just gone second, by the way, second overall. We've got just under 2 minutes of the session to go. So number 90 out on track. You're riding with the McLaren, which has, looking down the order, yet to do a proper lap time, I think I'm right in saying. Joe Wheeler's Ginetta has improved on a 33.5.
GT3 coming.
So you can see the radio there, I hear the radio coming in there, letting them know about GT3 traffic, and so important as a GT4 driver, especially to have a strong engineer letting you know, and then you see the GT3 coming. Yes, there's mega radios to let the drivers know, but the driver still has a responsibility to check his mirrors, even that rear view camera you can see there. And we were listening a bit yesterday, and you could hear a little bit of stress in the voice of the drivers, and again the engineer being on the front foot and then able to calm that driver down. It'll be interesting if we get to hear much in the race. This championship leading car, it feels so close. They only need 5 points over their rivals to clinch the championship today. But you can just see they're backing up, getting a bit of space so they can get at least a flyer before the checker flag falls.
Sandy Mitchell, just going back to GT3 for a moment, has done the absolute best first sector, so perhaps he's having one last blast just to try to make people be aware of Barwell going into the race. Over the timing line now goes Charles Clark, up towards Paddock. So as I say, this is the car with a commanding lead in the GT4 Championship. Could clinch that today, but in a 2-hour race, it's easier said than done, and the flag is 20 seconds away and counting.
Yeah, they had a small misfortune yesterday in free practice too. They had a really large water leak, which they just had to pull the car out of the session. I said yesterday in quality, it's so difficult to test here at Brands Hatch with the noise restriction. So neither of these drivers or Optima had the car around the circuit until yesterday. So when you lose 50% of your testing time, they were always on the back foot, they said, into quite a big snap of oversteer there. That would be the worst possible feeling for a driver, not just the oversteer, but knowing I've got 2 hours potentially of that coming up. This is where the car's going to be at its best, early in the morning before the track comes up. Adam Tanner, the engineer on this car, would have seen that obviously, and they'll be thinking they probably need quite a big setup change. So the snap of oversteer there looked like, to me, the rear of the car was way too stiff on turning. and they're going to have to try and address that balance. The drivers will not want that for 2 hours.
Fast forward to 1:30 this afternoon, which is when the race will be, and it's going to be hotter. How much of a difference will that increase in temperature make, partly to the track, partly therefore to the feel of the car?
So we saw track temperature 28 when we started the session. I think they got to 45, 46 in quali, which is a little later than the race, but maybe very similar. It's going to be 5 to 6 tenths of a second all day long with a tyre drop off, but also just the performance from the track itself. So it's going to be hard, and the cars are going to be moving around more. Once the car moves around more, generates more tyre temp, so you slide more, so then you generate more tyre temp, and that's then the story of your race. So it's going to be really interesting. It's a strong warm-up. Mitchell and Tregurtha for Barwell, first and second.
Yeah.
So maybe those guys have got a bit more pace than we saw yesterday.
Let's go to the pit lane once more. Sandy Mitchell's car tops the times. Bryn Lucas is with the Barwell team.
Well, Sean, it looks like a bit of a Lambo weekend, doesn't it, for yourselves and across the other side of the garage?
Yeah, the team's going really well. Barwell got the cars working well. Brands apparently has always been pretty good for the Lamborghinis. So gives you a bit of confidence from the outset, and the base platform worked pretty well. We made a few changes during the day yesterday. Still a little bit of suggestion that we could have gone a bit quicker in qualifying, but look, I guess there's a few drivers saying that down the pit lane once they've analysed their data, but it's going to be a feisty race, I think. Looking forward to it.
Very best of luck. Your car's being wheeled in right now, so we shall hand back to comms. Thanks, Sean.
So Sean Balfe with Bryn in the pit lane, Bryn Lucas down there, and it is the Lamborghinis topping the times. Not that this, as I keep saying, affects the grid, but just for the purposes of history. Sandy Mitchell and Sean Balfe fastest in the warm-up by just over a tenth from Will Tregurtha, who did the time, and then Ross Gunn. Rob Bell fourth from Jules Gounod, Dan Harper, Sam Neary, Johnny Adam eighth ahead of Michael O'Brien, and then Martin Plowman. As far as GT4 is concerned, number 23 topping the times, which after its big grassy moment yesterday is the Josh Miller, Seb Hopkins, Aston Martin. Second in GT4 is the Freddie Tomlinson Ginetta, number 56, the car that he shares with Stuart Middleton. And then third in GT4 in that session is the Paddock Motorsport Tom Rawlings and Kavi Jundu McLaren Artura. So quick look back at what happened in that session with the 2Cs Mercedes venturing out first, followed by the drive tack car, the Chris Hart James Wallace entry. Ian Loggy doing driving duties early on in number one before he gave it over to Jules Gounod, and the 61 Mustang also rumbling its way into contention, the Eric Evans Matt Cowley car. As ever, the Darren Lund, Dan Harper BMW was looking rapid. That's going to be a factor come the race, that is for sure. And 72, the car of Will Tregurtha, getting briefly to the top of the times before the sister car of Sandy Mitchell came through to go fastest. Two battles then, GT3 and GT4 to look forward to. Race starts at 1:30. We'll be on air from 1:10 for all the build-up. Join us for that. For now though, goodbye from Brands.